There are men who turn their hearts to stone because feeling is harder than silence. Takeo was one of them. A Ronin for 5 years, he wandered through the provinces of Japan like a shadow, present but never seen, alive but never living. He had learned the cruelest lesson a samurai can ever face. To love is to lose, and to lose is a pain no blade can cut and no code can heal. So he stopped loving. He simply closed that door inside himself and threw away the key into a well so deep even he could no longer find it. "No woman can move my heart," he would say whenever someone asked why he traveled alone. "My heart died with my clan. What remains is only survival." He believed those words completely, until one night when he stepped into Kyoto's most renowned tea house and saw a geisha do something no geisha ever should. She looked a powerful customer straight in the eyes and said in a voice soft as silk yet firm as steel, "No." And in that moment, that single, impossible act of defiance, something inside Takeo's chest, something he thought long dead, trembled. It woke and began to beat again. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. It helps this story reach more people and keeps the spirit of ancient Japan alive. Kyoto, 1655, the Edo period. The former imperial capital had become a city of contradictions, sacred temples beside pleasure districts, poverty hidden behind gilded facades, and everywhere the quiet suffocation of a Japan bound by the Tokugawa shogunate's forced peace. The wars were over. Samurai, men trained only for battle, now wandered without purpose. Many became Ronin, wolves without a pack, swords without a master. Some found new lords, others found new lives, and some, like Takeo, simply existed, caught between life and death, never fully in either. Takeo was 32, but he carried the weight of 60 years. Not in his body. He was still strong, still moved with the lethal grace of a man trained to kill since childhood, but in his eyes, they were the eyes of someone who had seen too much, lost too much, and decided the only solution was to see nothing at all. 5 years earlier, he had served the Tokimoto clan. It wasn't a powerful clan, but it was an honorable one. His lord was just. His fellow samurai were brothers. And there had been a woman, Yuki, the daughter of another samurai, who looked at Takeo in a way that made silent promises about a shared future. Then came the shogun's decree. The Tokimoto clan would be dissolved, a forced integration. The lord reassigned to a distant province, his samurai scattered. Some found service elsewhere. Most became Ronin. Takeo became one of them. And Yuki was promised to another man, the son of a powerful daimyo, a political marriage to secure her family's survival as the clan collapsed. She came to Takeo the night before she left, crying, telling him she loved him, wishing for a path that didn't exist. "But there isn't one," she whispered. "I'm a woman. I have no choice. I must obey." Takeo wanted to tell her they could run away together, wanted to promise they'd find a way, but he knew the truth. A Ronin without means had nothing to offer. No home, no future, no safety. Only day-by-day survival that would end in an unmarked grave. So he let her go, and when he learned months later that she had died giving birth to a child she never wanted, something inside Takeo simply stopped. For months he refused to accept it. There were rumors, contradictory whispers, letters that never arrived, messages from old comrades saying that not everything was clear. But he smothered every trace of hope. In the land suffocating under imposed peace, even truth seemed to die faster than the living. So he chose to believe she was gone. Because doubting his grief hurt more than grief itself, his heart kept beating, his lungs kept breathing. But the part of him that felt, that hoped, that believed in a better tomorrow dead, buried with Yuki. Once, in a roadside inn, Takeo overheard merchants whispering about a widowed woman in Kyoto, a woman with a scar, said to have the voice of someone who'd survived both love and death. He told himself it couldn't be her, just coincidence, a story made from the echoes of ghosts. Now he wondered. He took odd jobs, guarding merchants, teaching the basics of swordsmanship to eager sons of farmers, anything that kept food in his stomach. He slept in temples, barns, sometimes under the stars. Spoke little, felt even less. It was existence, nothing more, but existence was all he had left. So he accepted it, until that night. Takeo entered the Hanazono tea house because it was raining, and because its owner owed him a favor from long ago. The place was famous, one of Kyoto's most prestigious geisha houses, where wealthy men came to be entertained by women who had turned the arts of conversation and performance into something close to sacred. He didn't belong there. That much was obvious from his worn clothes, his unadorned sword, and the way the servants looked at him, with pity and quiet disdain. But the owner, an old man named Ichiro, spotted him and waved him in. "Takeo-san, it's been a long time. Ichiro-san, I hope you've been well as an old man can be." Ichiro gestured toward the warm, elegant interior. "You look like a drowned rat. Come, sit in the corner, have some hot sake. I can't offer you a geisha's company. You understand paying guests, but at least dry off and warm up." Takeo nodded gratefully. He was led to a discreet corner of the main hall, where he could observe without being seen. A servant brought him sake and a small plate of grilled fish, kindness Takeo knew he didn't deserve, but accepted nonetheless. The hall was full. Men in fine robes, merchants, government officials, even samurai from minor clans, laughed and talked while geisha moved among them. The women were stunning in their elaborate kimono, faces painted white, hair pinned in intricate styles that took hours to perfect. They played shamisen, danced, poured sake, and discussed poetry and politics with a mastery that turned each conversation into art. Takeo watched it all with the detachment of a man observing a play. Beautiful but not real. Performance, not life. Then she entered. The geisha was different from the others. Not in appearance. She wore the same elaborate kimono, the same white-painted face, but in how she moved. There was something in her posture, in the way her eyes swept across the room, that suggested she wasn't performing obedience. She was enduring it. "That's Riko," Ichiro murmured, following Takeo's gaze. "Our most talented and most troublesome geisha." Troublesome. She doesn't bow easily. Oh, she says all the right words, makes all the right gestures, but there's something in her. Independence, stubbornness. Clients either adore her or despise her. There's no in-between. Takeo watched as Riko approached a table where a particularly heavy-set man, dressed in silks that screamed new money, was gesturing wildly while telling a story he clearly found hilarious. His companions laughed with the kind of forced amusement that sounded like obedience, not joy. Riko knelt gracefully beside him, pouring sake with precise movements. The man paused his story to look at her. "You're new," he said, his words already slurred by drink. "I haven't seen you before." "I'm not new, sir. But it's your first visit to the Hanazono tea house. Welcome." Her voice was melodic, perfectly measured. "Welcome," he repeated mockingly. "Listen to that, welcome, as if I needed permission to be here." He leaned closer. "Do you know how much money I have? How much I pay to sit in this pretentious place?" "A great deal, I imagine, sir." "A great deal, yes. Which means," he reached out and grabbed Riko's wrist, "that when I want something, I get it." The hall grew quieter. Conversations faltered as people realized what was happening. Geisha were not to be touched that way, not without consent, not with force. There were rules, protocols. Riko didn't flinch. Her face remained calm, almost serene. But Takeo saw the tension in her shoulders, the faint tightening of her jaw. "Sir," she said evenly, "you're hurting me." "Am I?" The man squeezed harder. "Good. Maybe that'll teach you to be more receptive." "I pay for receptivity, don't I?" One of the house managers began moving toward the table. Ichiro half rose, worry etched across his face. The air thickened with discomfort. the collective awareness that something was about to break, and then Riko did something no geisha should ever do. She met the man's eyes, not lowering her gaze, not offering submission, but meeting him directly, and said, in a voice that carried across the entire hall, "No!" One word, simple, devastating. The man blinked, confused. "What?" "No." Riko carefully but firmly pulled her wrist free from his grip. "You don't pay for receptivity, sir. You pay for company, for conversation, for art. You do not pay for ownership of my body or my dignity. So when I say let go, you let go. When I say no, you respect it." Or she stood in one fluid motion. "You can find another tea house where standards are lower." The silence was absolute. The fat man turned red, then purple. He staggered to his feet, knocking over his sake cup. You dare, I'll..." "Sir," Ichiro was there now, bowing deeply. "Please accept my deepest apologies. Riko-san is unwell. Clearly not herself. Allow me to offer the company of another geisha, and of course, tonight's expenses will be covered by the house." "I don't want another geisha," the man roared. "I want this one fired, shamed. You want respect," Riko interrupted calmly. "We all do. The difference is, I don't have to buy mine." Then she turned and walked out of the hall, back straight, head high, leaving chaos in her wake. The fat man kept shouting. Ichiro tried to calm him. Other guests whispered, half in shock, half in admiration, and Takeo sat in his forgotten corner, hand tight around his cup of sake, feeling something he hadn't felt in 5 long years. Curiosity, no. More than that, admiration. That woman, that geisha who was supposed to embody grace and submission, had looked power in the eye and refused to bow. Not with anger, not with drama, but with a dignity so pure it turned defiance into truth. "Who are you?" he thought. "And how did you make it look so effortless?" He didn't know then that this question would change everything. Takeo hadn't planned to stay in Kyoto. He never stayed anywhere for more than a few days. Constant movement was safer than roots. And yet somehow, the next morning, he found himself walking back toward the Hanazono tea house. "She's been dismissed," Ichiro said with regret when Takeo asked. "The customer demanded it. He's an important man, a government official with connections. I couldn't afford to offend him. Where did she go?" "I don't know." When a geisha is dismissed, some find work in smaller houses. Others simply disappear, Ichiro sighed. "It's a shame. She was the best I ever had. Genuine talent. But talent without diplomacy is a disaster waiting to happen." Takeo spent the day asking around quietly. Kyoto was large, but the geisha world was small. Eventually, a street vendor who supplied vegetables to several tea houses mentioned seeing a woman matching Riko's description near the Gion district, not at a tea house, but around the smaller temples where women with no other options sometimes worked as cleaners or cooks. He found her at dusk, kneeling in the garden of a small, forgotten temple, sweeping fallen leaves. She no longer wore her elaborate kimono or the white makeup. In simple work clothes, her hair tied back in a plain ponytail, she looked younger, more human. "You," she said as he approached. "Not surprised, just stating it. The Ronin from the corner. You noticed me?" "I notice everything. It's part of the training." She kept sweeping. "If you came to lecture me about respecting clients, save your breath. I've heard enough of that already. I didn't come to lecture you." "Then why?" "Good question." Takeo wasn't sure himself. "To tell you that I admired what you did last night." That made her pause. She looked at him, really looked for the first time. "Admired? It's not easy to stand up to power. Most people bow. You didn't. And now I'm unemployed." She gestured to the temple. "Sweeping leaves for a bowl of rice. Some victory. Still, you chose dignity over convenience." "That's rare." Riko studied him for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled, a small, genuine smile. "You're strange, Ronin." "Takeo, my name is Takeo. Riko." She returned to sweeping. "Though that name probably doesn't mean much anymore. A dismissed geisha doesn't get hired again easily. Word travels fast. What will you do now?" "Survive. It's what I've always done." She paused. Why are you really here, Takeo-san? Men don't track down fallen geisha out of admiration. They want something. I don't want anything. Everyone wants something. He considered that. Maybe. I want to understand how you did it. How you refused to bow when everything you were taught told you to obey. Riko set the broom aside. You really want to know? Yes. Then walk with me. I can't talk here. The nuns dislike disturbances. And if we're going to have this conversation, it deserves more than quick whispers among fallen leaves. They walked through the temple gardens as the evening light painted everything in gold and shadow. Riko spoke and Takeo listened. I was sold to the Okiya when I was 5, she began.
Poor parents.
Too many mouths to feed, the usual story. I spent 15 years learning to be perfect. To walk perfectly, to smile perfectly. To serve, entertain, and disappear when convenient. I learned 1,000 rules about how to be less than human so men could feel more. But you didn't accept that. For years, I did. What else could I do? It was survival. But then, she fell silent for a moment. Then I saw my best friend, another geisha named Sakura, destroyed by a client who decided he had bought more than her company. He hurt her. Badly, and when she reported it, when she asked for help, the house blamed her. They said she hadn't been receptive enough, that she should have entertained his desires better. Takeo's voice turned cold, and the man, still a client, still is to this day, because he has money. And money buys everything, even the right to hurt without consequence. Sakura, she disappeared. Some say she went back to her village. Others say, Riko's voice dropped. When women disappear in this world, there are rarely happy endings. They walked in silence for several steps. That's when I decided, Riko continued. No more, not with me. If I had to sell my art, my time, my company, fine. That was an honest trade. But my dignity, my humanity, those were never for sale. At any price. And last night? Last night that fat pig thought his money bought him the right to hurt me, to humiliate me. And I couldn't bow. I couldn't smile and pretend it was fine. So I said no. She looked at him. You said you admired that. But it cost me everything. My position, my reputation, my future. Was a single word, a single moment of dignity worth all that? Takeo stopped walking and turned fully to face her. Yes, it was. Because that moment, that refusal, was more real than all the perfect bows you've ever given. It was you choosing who you are, instead of who the world told you to be. Tears shimmered in Riko's eyes. She blinked them away fiercely. You talk like a poet. But poetry doesn't pay for food. It doesn't buy shelter. I made a noble, stupid choice, and now I'll pay for it for the rest of my life. Maybe not. What? Maybe, Takeo said slowly, the idea forming as he spoke. Maybe you don't have to do it alone. Riko crossed her arms. If this is some offer of charity from a poor Ronin, thank you, but no. Not charity, partnership. Partnership in what? Takeo wasn't sure. But for the first time in 5 years, he felt something besides emptiness. He felt possibility. I don't know yet. But you need a place to stay. And I need a reason to stay. Maybe we can figure it out together. You're insane. I'm a Ronin. It's almost the same thing. She actually laughed then, a real laugh, not the practiced giggle of a geisha, but something genuine and startled. Well, maybe crazy is exactly what I need right now. So, yes or no? Riko glanced at the temple, where she had been sweeping leaves for a bowl of rice. Then at Takeo, with his strange eyes, his serious voice, and his even stranger offer. Then at the darkening sky, where the first stars were starting to appear. Yes, she said at last. But on one condition, which is? You stop saying that no woman can move your heart. Because, Takeo-san, she smiled. That lie is so obvious even the leaves I just swept can see through it. And Takeo, who had sworn his heart was dead, felt it beat faster, just a little, but enough. They found shelter in a forgotten corner of Kyoto, not quite inside the city, not quite outside. An abandoned hut near the river, once used by fishermen to dry their nets before the trade died out. The roof leaked. The floorboards were rotting in places. But it had 4 walls and a door that locked, and that was more than either of them had any right to expect. It's perfect, Riko declared on the first day. Looking around with an approval Takeo suspected was half irony, half desperate sincerity. It's falling apart, then fix it. You're a samurai, aren't you? Didn't they teach you carpentry as part of your training? I learned swordsmanship, calligraphy, strategy, not carpentry. Then we'll learn together. She rolled up the sleeves of the plain kimono she now wore. I'm used to performing. You're used to wandering. Maybe it's time we both learned to build. There was truth in that. So they built. Takeo spent what few coins he had on wood and nails. Riko bargained with local vendors, using the lingering charm of her geisha training to get better prices. Together, they patched the roof, reinforced the floor, even managed to buy some used tatami mats from a merchant closing his shop. It took 2 weeks. 2 weeks of working side by side, of hands blistered with splinters, of frustration when things collapsed, and quiet triumph when they finally held. And somewhere during those 2 weeks, something changed between them. Not love. Not yet, but recognition. The kind that grows when you watch someone fight the impossible and refuse to surrender. The kind that forms when you share simple meals, rice and pickled vegetables, and turn them into feasts through late-night conversations. Takeo discovered Riko was brilliant. Not just talented in the traditional arts of a geisha, but truly intelligent. She read whenever she could borrow or find discarded books, and absorbed ideas like dry earth absorbs rain. She had opinions on everything from politics to philosophy, and wasn't afraid to debate them. The shogunate is suffocating the country, she said one night as they ate. This forced peace, it looks like stability, but it's really a prison. No one can move. No one can change. We're all just existing inside structures built by others. Structure prevents chaos, Takeo replied. I've seen what happens without order. Civil war, clans destroying clans, blood in every street. So the choice is between total chaos and total rigidity. There's no middle ground? I don't know if there is. Then maybe we need to make one. She looked around their cabin, small, imperfect, but theirs. Like we did here. Build something new from broken pieces. Takeo considered that. You make it sound possible, because it is. You just stop trying. She was right. He had stopped trying. After Yuki's death, after everything he cared for fell apart, he had decided that trying was useless. That hope was a luxury a Ronin couldn't afford. But now, watching Riko, this woman who had lost as much as he had yet still fought, still believed, he began to wonder if he'd been wrong. Money was a constant problem. Takeo took whatever work he could find, escorting nervous merchants along dangerous roads, teaching the basics of swordsmanship to the spoiled sons of rich farmers, anything that paid. But work was sporadic, and his reputation as a masterless Ronin meant he was never anyone's first choice. Riko faced even harsher challenges. A fallen geisha was marked. No respectable tea house would touch her after the incident. She tried to find work as a servant, a seamstress, even a washerwoman. But inevitably someone recognized her face. Someone knew the story, and the doors closed. They act like I committed a crime, she said bitterly after another day of rejection. All I did was say one word, no, and now I'm untouchable. Not untouchable, Takeo corrected. A threat? A threat? Yes, because you proved it's possible to refuse. That women, even women without power, can have boundaries. That dignity isn't for sale. That terrifies people. People who built their fortunes on the idea that everything and everyone has a price. Riko thought about that. So I'm punished not for what I did, but for what I represent. Exactly. That's, she searched for the word, absurd and infuriating, and yet perversely it makes me want to fight harder. Takeo smiled despite himself. You're stubborn. I learned from the best. You think I haven't noticed how you refuse to give up? How you keep looking for work even when everyone says Ronin are worthless? That's not stubbornness. It's just that there's no alternative. There's always an alternative, Riko said. Giving up. Letting yourself die. You choose not to do either. That's stubbornness and strength. She looked at him with something that might have been admiration. Don't underestimate that. The solution came from an unexpected place. One of the temples where Riko occasionally helped, the Temple of the Silent Lotus, was having trouble. Bandits had begun harassing pilgrims on the road leading to the shrine. Not serious violence, but intimidation, demanding tolls for safe passage. The monks had reported it to the authorities, but the local magistrates were too busy with more important matters. "We need protection," the abbot told Takeo when he learned the Ronin's background. "Not to fight, just to be present." "Bandits are cowards. If they see an armed samurai guarding the road, they'll probably stay away. I'm no longer a samurai. I'm a Ronin. You carry swords. That's enough to scare cowards," the abbot paused. "We can pay little, but we offer meals and a place to stay if needed. And," he turned to Riko, "if your companion is willing, she could teach some of our novices. We have young women eager to learn refined arts, calligraphy, music, etiquette. You have those skills, don't you?" Riko's eyes widened. "You'd let me teach, even knowing. I know you said no to a powerful man. You valued your dignity over your position. Why would that make me want you less as a teacher? If anything, it makes you exactly the kind of teacher our novices need." It was the first time Takeo had seen Riko truly speechless. The months that followed fell into rhythm. Takeo guarded the temple road, a tedious job most days, though occasionally the bandits did appear. He drove them off with nothing more than a hand on his sword's hilt and a look that said he had killed before and wouldn't hesitate to do it again. It was a lie. Takeo avoided killing whenever possible. But the bandits didn't need to know that. Riko taught the novices. She guided their calligraphy, showing them how each stroke of the brush carried intention. She taught them to play the shamisen, the three-string instrument mastered by Geisha. And more importantly, she taught them something never written in any temple curriculum, something Takeo saw unfold in small, quiet moments. She taught them to find their own voices. You don't have to agree just because someone older said it. He heard her tell a novice who had questioned a classical poem's interpretation. Respect doesn't mean silence. It means thinking carefully, then speaking your truth with grace. The young women adored her. And gradually, stories began to spread about the teacher at the Silent Lotus Temple who had once been a geisha but left that life on principle. About how she taught not just with grace, but with conviction. Then something unexpected happened. Other women began to appear. Not novices, ordinary women, merchants' wives, farmers' daughters, even a few geisha from smaller houses, arriving in secret, all wanting to learn. Not only art, but what Riko embodied, how to exist in a world that demanded submission without losing yourself. "You're starting a movement," Takeo observed one night as he watched Riko prepare her lessons. "I'm not starting anything. I just teach. You're teaching a revolution. A silent one. The kind that happens heart by heart, mind by mind." Riko paused. "Does that bother you?" "No, it impresses me. But it worries me. Change frightens powerful people, and frightened people are dangerous. So what do you suggest? That I stop? That I go back to being invisible?" "No, just be careful. The world you're challenging doesn't surrender easily." He had no idea how prophetic those words would be. The change began subtly. Small incidents that meant little on their own, but together formed a pattern. The government official Riko had defied, the fat man who had demanded her dismissal, began making visits to the temple. Not to pray, to inspect, to ask questions about the teachers employed there, about their credentials, their pasts. "It's persecution," the abbot said to Takeo, troubled. "He's still angry, still wants to hurt her. You could dismiss her. Protect the temple." "I could, but I won't. Riko has done nothing wrong. I will not bow to intimidation, even from an official." It was noble. But Takeo saw the danger. Men like that official didn't forget. They didn't forgive. They only waited for the right opportunity to strike. That opportunity came 2 months after the inspections began. One of Riko's students, a young woman named Hana, daughter of a wealthy merchant, was promised in marriage to a man she had never met. A man 3 times her age, known for his cruelty to previous wives. When she protested, her father refused to listen. Hana ran away. She sought refuge at the Temple of the Silent Lotus. "Please," she begged Riko and the abbot. "Just a few days, until I know what to do. I cannot marry him. I'd rather die." The abbot looked to Riko. Riko looked to Takeo. Takeo read the dilemma on their faces. To refuse the girl's shelter would be to condemn her to a fate none of them could in conscience accept. But to shelter her was to challenge her father, and by extension, the whole structure that gave fathers absolute control over their daughters. "She stays," Riko said at last, "until we find a better solution." "Her father will come," Takeo warned, "and he will not come alone. Then you will be here to make sure his arrival is civil," Riko replied. Takeo wanted to argue. He wanted to point out that this was precisely the confrontation he feared. But looking at Hana, so young, so terrified, he could not. "I will be here," he agreed. Hana's father arrived the next day with 10 men, not samurai, but hired thugs, muscle without thought, the kind that carried orders without question. He had brought, too, the government official, the same fat man Riko had defied, smiling, triumphant. "This is kidnapping." Hana's father roared when he met the abbot. "You are holding my daughter against my will." "She came of her own free will," the abbot replied calmly. "And she is welcome to stay as long as she wants. Temples offer sanctuary for criminals. She's my daughter, my property. I demand—" "You demand nothing here," Takeo interrupted, stepping out of the shadows. His hand rested on his sword's hilt, not threatening, not yet, but it promised. "This is sacred ground. The girl is under the temple's protection." The government official stepped forward. "Ah, the Ronin. I should have expected to find you involved. Tell me, are you paid to protect fugitives now, or are you keeping company?" He looked to Riko behind Takeo, a fallen geisha and a masterless samurai. "How pathetic." "Watch your tongue," Takeo said softly. "Or what? You will cut me down? In front of witnesses? You would be executed. And then who would protect your little sanctuary?" It was true. Everyone there knew it. "There is a peaceful solution," the abbot tried. "If Hana's parents agree to delay the marriage, to give the girl time to meet her groom." "No," the father snapped. "She will marry as arranged. This is final." "Then she stays here," Riko said, voice steady. "Forcing her into a marriage she does not choose is slavery, no matter how prettily you dress it in tradition." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken violence. The official smiled. "Very well. Then I suppose we have no choice but to involve the proper authorities. I will file a formal complaint with the magistrate. Kidnapping, interference with parental rights, misuse of a temple for criminal purposes." He looked directly at Riko. "And this time, when you fall, no one will be there to catch you." They left. It was retreat, not surrender. Takeo knew it. Everyone knew it. "We did the right thing," Riko said that night, voice trembling slightly. "Didn't we?" "Yes," Takeo replied. "But the right thing often comes with a heavy price." "How long do we have?" "Days, maybe a week if we're lucky. The magistrate will send investigators. They will hear the father's side. And then," he paused, "the temple will be forced to hand Hana over or face consequences. We can't let that happen. How do we stop it?" "We are nobody. You a geisha without a house. Me, a Ronin without a clan. Against a government official and a wealthy merchant. We have no leverage." Riko was silent for a long moment. "Then what if we did?" "What? Leverage? What if there were a way to turn the situation? To make them back down? Do you have something in mind?" She hesitated. "Maybe, but it's dangerous. And it requires me to do something I swore I would never do again." "What?" "Go back, into the world I left. To places where I still have contacts, even if no position." She looked at him. "Geisha hear secrets, Takeo. We listen. Men drink in our company and forget there are ears. I know things about that official. Things he would not want public." A shiver crawled down Takeo's spine. "You mean blackmail?" "I mean using the same weapons they use against us. Power, information, fear. That's dangerous. Living is dangerous. We agreed on that already." She took his hands, the first time she had deliberately touched him. "But I will not do it if you say no." This is your fight now too, so decide. Do we fight back or accept defeat and watch that girl be destroyed? Takeo looked at Hana, at her hollow-eyed fear, at the abbot's quiet resolve, and at Riko, steadfast, fierce, willing to risk everything. He felt something stir that was no longer only for himself. We fight, he said. Together, and carefully, because once we start, there is no going back. Do you understand that? I understand. Then we do it. Takeo looked down at their clasped hands. He thought of Yuki, how he hadn't fought for her, how he'd found no way to save her. He thought of all the years since, wandering without purpose because he believed fighting was useless. Then he thought of Riko, how she had refused to give up, refused to bow even when it cost her everything. Maybe it was time to stop wandering, to actually fight for something. We fight, he said, but together and carefully, because if we do this, there's no turning back. Do you understand that? I do. And you still want to go through with it? She squeezed his hands. With you at my side? Yes, and there, in that moment of shared agreement, something fundamental shifted between them. They were no longer merely two people sharing space. They were partners, allies. Something deeper was beginning to form, something dangerously close to love. But neither of them said the word. Not yet. There was too much at stake for distractions. Riko's plan was simple but bold. She knew the government official, Lord Matsuda, frequented a particular tea house. Not the prestigious Hanazono house from which she had been dismissed, but a smaller, more discreet place, one favored by married men who didn't want their indulgences reported back to their wives. He has a mistress there, Riko explained. One of the Geisha. And not only that, he's been using government funds to pay for her company. Her voice lowered. I have letters that prove it, she said. When Matsuda began visiting the house where I worked, many of us knew he was using public money for his vices. I was the one who kept copies of the notes and receipts, not out of courage, but instinct. Women like us need something to protect ourselves when the world decides to blame us. She drew a small envelope from within the folds of her kimono. Years have passed, and I held on to this without knowing why. Now I do. Takeo opened the envelope and read. His eyes widened. The letters were not only about stolen money. They spoke of abuse, of threats, of Matsuda using his position to destroy those who crossed him. He wasn't merely corrupt. He was a monster. If these are made public, he'll be ruined, Riko said. Possibly executed. At the very least, stripped of his post and exiled. She took the letters back. That's why he'll back down. Even powerful men fear exposure, or, Takeo said slowly, he'll have us killed. You mean anyone who knows about this? You're betting that he values self-preservation more than revenge. Exactly. Which is why we need insurance. Insurance. Copies of these letters will go to 3 different people, respected priests, scholars, people Matsuda can't touch, each with instructions to make them public if anything happens to us. She met his eyes. I've thought it through. That's why it's safe in theory and in practice. In practice, we'll find out tomorrow when we confront him. Takeo wanted to argue, to find a safer way, but seeing the determination in Riko's eyes, he knew there wasn't one. Sometimes the only way out was through. Tomorrow then, he said. But I'm coming with you, non-negotiable. I wouldn't expect anything less. They spent the rest of the night preparing. Riko wrote careful instructions to the 3 priests, explaining what to do if she and Takeo disappeared. Takeo sharpened his sword, not because he expected to fight, but because a man with a weapon was taken more seriously than one without. And at some point, deep in the night, when all was ready and there was nothing left to do but wait for dawn, they found themselves sitting side by side, shoulders touching. Thank you, Riko said softly. For what? For staying. For fighting. For not calling me insane for doing this. You are insane, Takeo said, smiling faintly. But you're also brave. And right. And he paused. And I can't imagine being anywhere else. She turned her head toward him. In the flickering candlelight, her eyes seemed endless. You know what's funny? She murmured. When I met you, I thought you were just another bitter Ronin. Another man who had given up, I was. But not anymore. You've changed. Or maybe, she smiled lightly, maybe I'm only seeing you clearly for the first time. You've seen me. Or made me. Both. Neither. Takeo, she took his hand. You once said no woman could move your heart. Do you still believe that? He should have said yes. He should have kept the walls he had built so carefully around himself. He should have protected himself from the kind of pain that comes from letting someone in. But looking at Riko, at the way the light caught her face, at the strength and vulnerability in her eyes, he found that he couldn't lie. No, he whispered. Not anymore. You've changed something in me. I don't know if it's love yet, but it's something. Something I thought was dead. Well, Riko whispered, leaning forward until their foreheads touched, then I suppose we're even. Because you've changed something in me too. You reminded me that I can choose, that I can fight, that I'm not alone. They stayed that way, foreheads pressed, breaths mingling, until the candles burned low and the sky began to lighten with the first hint of dawn. And when the sun finally rose, they stood together, ready to face whatever came next, together. The tea house, where Lord Matsuda conducted his private dealings, was tucked away in a narrow alley, the kind of place that announced discretion by its very invisibility. No signboard, no ornate lanterns, just a modest door and the understanding that those who needed to know already did. Takeo and Riko arrived at midday, when the establishment would be quietest. The serious clients came only at night. During the day it was mostly preparation, and occasionally men like Matsuda, who had both time and money to waste. The proprietress, an older woman with eyes that missed nothing, blocked their path. We're not open to... She stopped, recognizing Riko. I heard you fell from grace. You heard right, Riko replied evenly. But I didn't come as a guest. I came to negotiate. With whom? Lord Matsuda. He's here, isn't he? The woman's eyes narrowed. And if he is, then I suggest you tell him Riko is here, and that I bring documents he'll want to see before they become public. The threat was clear. The proprietress studied them, the disgraced Geisha and the dangerous-looking Ronin beside her, and made the practical choice. Wait here. She disappeared inside. The minutes stretched. Takeo kept his hand close to his sword, eyes sweeping the alley. Every shadow was a possible ambush. Every sound could mean trouble. Easy, Riko murmured. He'll negotiate first. Men like him always do. And if he doesn't, then you get me out of here. And we make everything public, in the loudest way possible. It wasn't a comforting plan, but it was the one they had. The proprietress returned. He'll see you, but only the two of you, and no weapons. Takeo didn't move. I keep my sword. Then there will be no meeting. Then there's no meeting, Takeo agreed. And turning to leave, wait, the voice came from inside, deep, calm, amused. Let the Ronin keep his precious sword, Matsuda said. It won't help him when he realizes how deep a grave he's dug for himself. The proprietress stepped aside, and they entered. Inside, the tea house was surprisingly elegant. The plain exterior hid real luxury. Polished wood, hanging scrolls painted by masters, the faint, expensive scent of incense. Matsuda sat on silk cushions, a cup of sake in hand. He wasn't in formal robes of a government official, but in the fine, casual attire of a man at leisure. Beside him knelt the geisha Riko had spoken of. Quietly plucking a shamisen, he waved her away with a flick of his hand. She left with visible relief. So, Matsuda said without rising, the fallen whore and her guard dog. You have a few seconds of my attention before I have you beaten and thrown in the river. Use them wisely. Riko didn't flinch. She drew the envelope from her kimono and placed it on the low table between them. These are letters, written by you, detailing the embezzlement of public funds, bribes, threats, and, she paused, very specific descriptions of what you did to women who refused your advances. Matsuda didn't even look at the envelope. So, you think you can blackmail me? I'm not trying to blackmail you. I'm offering a trade. Oh? And what could I possibly want from you? You stop harassing the Silent Lotus Temple. You stop forcing Hana into marriage. You stop using your position to destroy people who only want to live with dignity. Her voice was steady. Do that and these letters remain private. Matsuda finally looked at the envelope. Then surprisingly he laughed. You think I'm afraid of paper? Of words? You should be, Takeo said. Because those words, in the right hands, could destroy you. And you think you have the right hands? Matsuda leaned forward, sneering. Let me explain something, children. Power isn't about evidence. It's about who controls the story. You could have a confession written in my own blood and it wouldn't matter. Because I control the magistrates. I control the investigators. I control the people who decide what truth is. Even you can't control everyone, Riko said firmly. Can't I? Then tell me, who exactly do you plan to give these damning letters to? Matsuda smirked. Priests. I fund half the temples in this city. Scholars. They rely on patrons like me. The shogunate? You think they care to air the dirty laundry of a minor official when they have entire provinces to govern? Takeo felt the weight of those words. Matsuda was right. They had underestimated how deep his corruption ran. You made a fatal mistake, Matsuda continued. You confused being right with having power. But the world doesn't work that way. This world belongs to men like me, men who understand that morality is a luxury of the rich, and that the poor, he gestured toward them with contempt, exist to serve. You're wrong, Riko said, though her voice trembled slightly. Am I? Then prove it. Matsuda grabbed the envelope, opened it, and read the letters with casual disinterest. When he finished, he tossed them back onto the table. Interesting. Some of these I don't even remember writing, but you know what's funny? It doesn't matter. Who would believe you? A fallen geisha and a failed Ronin? You have no credibility, no position, nothing. Matsuda made a quick gesture, and two of his guards stepped out from behind the side curtains, hands on the hilts of short swords. You think you can come to me and walk away? He taunted. Kyoto is full of rivers. Anonymous bodies turn up in them every week. Takeo stepped in front of Riko, his hand firm on the katana's hilt. The silence that followed stretched for seconds, but felt like an eternity. One more step and blood would flow. Ah, but they have. The new voice came from the doorway. Everyone turned. A woman stood there. Not just a woman, a lady. Her kimono was of fine quality that spoke of wealth without flaunting it. Her posture was upright. Her face was partly hidden by an ornate silk fan. When she lowered the fan, Takeo felt his heart stop. It was Yuki. Takeo's throat closed. The air left his lungs. For a heartbeat, time fractured, memories, grief, and disbelief colliding like blades. The woman before him was both ghost and wound, standing where memory had refused to fade. He wanted to speak, but the words drowned in shock. Impossible. He had heard she was dead, died in childbirth 5 years ago, but there she was, older, thinner, scarred. There was a mark at her temple where hair didn't quite grow back. But alive, Yuki! The name slipped from Takeo like a prayer and a curse. She looked at him, and in her eyes he saw recognition, pain, and something that might have been an apology. Takeo-san, it's been a long time. For the first time, Matsuda looked genuinely surprised. Madam Ishikawa, what brings you to my humble silence? Her voice cut like a blade. You speak of power, Matsuda, of controlling narratives, but you forget there are different kinds of power. She moved into the room with the practiced grace of someone who had learned to navigate society's sharp edges. I am the widow of Lord Ishikawa. I run his trading interests now that he is gone. And more importantly, I am blood sister to Lord Yamada, a senior counselor to the shogun. Color drained from Matsuda's face. So when you ask who would believe these letters, Yuki picked the envelope up from the table. The answer is everyone. I will take them straight to the shogun, to my brother. Then we'll see how well your story holds up when confronted with documented proof and testimony from someone with real standing. You can't. I can. And I will. She looked at Riko and Takeo. Unless you agree to the terms proposed. Stop persecuting the Silent Lotus Temple. Let Hana choose her own path. And her voice hardened. "Stop using your office to harm the defenseless." Matsuda was pale now, hands trembling. "If I agree, then the letters remain with me, private, and you keep your post for now. But one misstep, one harmed person, and I will destroy you so thoroughly even your family will not remember your name." It was an ultimatum, no negotiation, only submission or annihilation. Matsuda glanced around at Riko, Takeo, Yuki, searching for an escape and finding none. "I agree," he hissed at last. "But one day you'll all pay for this humiliation." "Perhaps," Yuki said calmly. "But that day is not today. Now leave. You sully this place with your presence." Matsuda rose with difficulty and practically ran for the door. When he was gone, silence fell over the room. Takeo still could not process it. How are you alive?" Yuki turned to him. Tears shone in her eyes. "Because I didn't die in childbirth, Takeo. That was a lie my husband spread. The truth." She touched the scar at her temple. "The child was stillborn. Maybe that was mercy. He used that loss as his excuse to erase me from his world before I could erase myself. The truth is, I tried to take my own life. I couldn't bear being married to a man I did not love, carrying a child I did not want, living a life I never chose." Yuki: "But I failed, obviously." Bitter laughter. "I woke weeks later. My husband was dead, an infection, ironic as it is. Suddenly I was a wealthy widow, free, too late. You had already gone, vanished into Ronin wandering. I searched, God, how I searched, but you were not to be found. I thought you were dead. I was mostly gone. My body forgot to follow." She wiped her eyes. "But lately I heard stories about a geisha who defied a powerful man, about a Ronin who protected her. Something in that story, it reminded me of you, of who you were before the world broke you." Riko had been silent through the exchange, but now she spoke quietly. "You came to help. Why?" Yuki looked at her, really looked, because when I read your story, I saw my own. I saw every woman who had been forced, bent, or broken by a system that treats us as property. And I thought, if I have power now, if I have position, why not use it for something that matters? But why help us specifically?" Riko pressed. "Why risk your reputation?" Yuki hesitated, then turned to Takeo. "Because I owe him. A long time ago, I let the man I loved walk away because I wasn't brave enough to choose him over safety. Now you've found someone who is brave enough, who chooses you every day. The least I can do is make sure the two of you have a chance to build what we never did." The air thickened with all the words left unsaid. Finally, Takeo found his voice. "Thank you. For this, for everything. But Yuki, I know." She smiled sadly. "You don't love me anymore. I can see it. And that's all right. Maybe it was never really about love. Maybe it was just two lonely people finding each other briefly before the world tore them apart. It wasn't just that, no. But it also wasn't what we thought it was." She looked between them. "What you have," she gestured to Takeo and Riko, "that feels real. It feels like a choice. Don't settle for less than that." Then she turned to leave. "Yuki!" Takeo called after her. "Will you be all right?" She looked back. "For the first time in years, I think I will. Because I finally used my power for something beyond survival. And that," her voice broke slightly, "that's more freeing than you can imagine." And then she was gone, leaving Takeo and Riko standing in the silence of the tea house. Weeks later, Takeo heard she had left Kyoto for good, joining a women's refuge near Edo. She was helping others rebuild the lives she once tried to end. It was the closest thing to peace she'd ever known. They didn't speak on the way back to the temple. There was too much to process, too much to feel. When they arrived, Hana ran to meet them. "What happened?" "Are you all right?" "It's over," Riko said, embracing her. "Your father will stand down. You won't have to marry that man. You're free." Hana began to cry, tears of pure relief. The abbot appeared, smiling with quiet approval. Other novices gathered, celebrating, but Takeo and Riko slipped away, needing space, silence. They found themselves back in the small cabin they had rebuilt together. Inside, surrounded by the walls they had mended and beneath the roof they had repaired, They finally let their masks fall. "You loved her," Riko said. Not accusing, just stating a truth. "Yes, a long time ago." Takeo sat heavily. "I thought she was dead. I spent 5 years believing she was gone. I built my entire life around that loss. And now, he looked at Riko. "Now I see that I lost her long before she died. I lost her the moment I accepted that we couldn't be together. And she lost me too. We were two people wanting something we could never have, so we romanticized the impossibility, but it wasn't love. It was love. But love isn't enough when you don't fight for it, when you accept defeat before you even try." He took Riko's hand. "With you it's different. We fight every day, for every small thing. For this cabin, for that temple, for Hana, for the idea that we can be more than the boxes the world tries to fit us into." "Are you sure?" Riko's voice was small. "Because she's still alive. It's still possible." "No," Takeo said it firmly. "It's not possible. Because she isn't you. And you—" His voice went rough. "You're the first thing in 5 years that's made me want to stop wandering. To build. Not just exist, but live." Tears slipped down Riko's cheeks. "You once said no woman could move your heart. I was wrong." Or maybe he touched her face gently. "Maybe I was right then, but you proved me wrong. You didn't just move my heart. You brought it back to life, Takeo." She leaned into him, and this time, when their lips met, there was no hesitation. Only certainty, only choice. They kissed as the sun set outside their small cabin, while the world went on turning, indifferent and eternal. But within those walls, something new was being born. Not a fairy tale romance, not a love that conquered everything effortlessly, something stronger, a love that chose to endure, a love that fought, a love that built from broken pieces and said, "This is enough. You are enough. We are enough." And sometimes that was the most revolutionary thing of all. The months that followed brought change. Hana chose not to marry, not the man her father had chosen, nor anyone else for the time being. Instead, she asked to become a novice at the temple, studying not only traditional arts, but also philosophy and literature. She wanted to learn to think, not just to obey. Her father, ashamed but powerless under Yuki's veiled threat, agreed. Lord Matsuda kept his promise, partly out of fear of Yuki, partly because humiliation had hollowed out his appetite for power. He remained in his government post, but quietly, restrained. A man who had learned that even power has limits. The silent Lotus Temple flourished. Riko's school grew, not only teaching the traditional arts, but something far more subversive. She taught young women to question, to think critically, to understand that submission was a choice, not a destiny. "You're creating a generation of troublemakers," Takeo teased her. "Good," she replied. "The world needs more trouble, especially the kind that asks why things are instead of how they could be." Takeo found his own purpose. He no longer merely guarded the temple, he taught. Young samurai from minor clans, Ronin like himself, even merchant sons eager to learn the way of the sword. But he taught differently than he had been taught. "The sword isn't about killing," he told his students. "It's about knowing when not to draw it. Strength comes not from violence, but from restraint, from choice. Anyone can wield a blade. Only the wise know when to keep it sheathed." And each night, he and Riko returned to the small cabin they had turned into a home. They cooked together, ate together, spoke of their days together. Sometimes they made love, not with the urgency of new lovers, but with the familiarity of partners who had come to know each other's bodies, and found joy both in the known and the newly discovered. Other times, they simply sat side by side, watching the river flow beyond their door, a content in a silence that didn't need to be filled. "Do you still think of her?" Riko asked one night. "Of Yuki?" Takeo considered. "Sometimes, but not with longing, more like gratitude. Gratitude for showing me that loving and losing doesn't mean love itself must die, that a broken heart can heal if you let it." He kissed her temple. "And gratitude because she led me to you in her own strange, twisted way. Without that loss, I never would have wandered. Never would have walked into that tea house. Never would have seen you refuse to bow. So what you're saying, Riko laughed, is that I should thank your ex for bringing us together. That's torturously romantic. It's not about her. It's about the path. About how sometimes the worst things lead to the best. He turned to face her. Riko, I have a question. Ask. Marry me. She froze. You know I can't. Fallen geisha aren't allowed to marry samurai. It stains the bloodline, they say. And besides, you're a Ronin. No clan to grant permission. Then we won't do it their way. We'll do it ours. I'll declare you my wife. You'll declare me your husband. We'll live as such. Let the world think what it will. You'd give up a formal marriage. Tradition? I gave up tradition the day I became a Ronin. And I've realized tradition doesn't keep me warm at night. It doesn't make me laugh. It doesn't challenge me to be better. You do all of those things. He took her hands. So yes, I'll give up every formality if it means keeping you. Tears streamed freely down Riko's face. You are the most foolish, most wonderful, most impossible man I've ever met. So is that a yes? Yes, obviously yes. 1,000 times yes. There was no ceremony, no priest. No official blessing, but the next morning they stood together by the river and spoke their vows aloud. Simple, direct. I choose you, Takeo said. Today and every day after, in plenty and in want, in joy and in sorrow. I choose you, Riko echoed. Not because I must, not because tradition demands it, but because when I look at you, I see a partner, an equal, someone who fights beside me, not for me. I choose you. There were no witnesses except the river, the trees, and the sky, none of which cared for human conventions anyway, but it was enough, more than enough. It was everything. There's a truth the world rarely admits. Love isn't something you find. It's something you decide. We don't stumble upon soulmates. We build partnerships. We don't fall in love like tripping into a pit. We walk toward it, eyes open, step by step, choosing it every time. Takeo once thought his heart was dead because he confused loss with end. He believed that because he had loved and lost, he could never love again. That a broken heart stayed broken forever. But hearts aren't porcelain. They don't shatter beyond repair. They're more like trees, able to grow around their wounds, to reshape, to keep living even while carrying scars. And Riko had spent her whole life learning to bow, to serve, to make herself smaller so that others could feel taller. She thought dignity was a luxury someone in her position could never afford, until the day she decided that bowing cost more than standing tall. That being someone's property was too high a price to pay for safety. Together, they learned a truth the world tries hard to hide. You don't need permission to choose your own life. You don't need approval to love who you love. You don't need a piece of paper to make a commitment real. You only need the courage to say, "This is who I am. This is what I choose, and I will not apologize for it." Is that radical? Yes, dangerous? Absolutely, but it's also the only real way to live, because living isn't about following the paths others drew for you. It's not about filling roles society wrote long before you were born. It's not about becoming what was always expected. Living is about looking at what the world offers, its rules, its structures, its certainties, and saying, "Thank you, but no, I'll do it differently." Takeo and Riko didn't change Japan. They didn't topple the shogunate or rewrite the social codes. Their revolution was small, personal, tucked inside a mended cabin by a river, and in the lives of a handful of young women who learned that submission was a choice, not a destiny. But small revolutions matter, maybe more than the grand ones, because great revolutions change systems, but small ones change hearts. And changed hearts, one by one, choice by choice, eventually change everything else. You don't need to be a samurai to understand this. You don't need to be a geisha or live in feudal Japan. You only need to have faced a moment when the world told you who you should be. And you chose differently. You chose yourself. You chose the person you loved instead of the one you were told made sense. You chose dignity over convenience. In those quiet moments, private, unseen by anyone but you, You are living the same story Takeo and Riko lived. You are proving that choice is stronger than fate. That commitment freely given means more than obedience enforced. That real love isn't about finding the perfect person. It's about choosing the imperfect one again and again, and building something beautiful from that repeated choice. Hearts don't die when you lose someone. They just fall asleep, and sometimes, just sometimes, the right person wakes them again, not because they're magical, not because they're flawless, but because they see you, truly see you, and choose you anyway, and you choose them back. That mutual choice, that conscious decision to build together, is what turns two lonely souls into a partnership, into a home, into love. Takeo was wrong when he said no woman could move his heart, but he was also right because Riko didn't move his heart. She brought it back to life, and that's something entirely different, something better, something worth every risk, every hardship, every uncertain step, because in the end, we only have two real choices. We can protect ourselves, build walls around our hearts, wander through life never truly connecting, because connection means vulnerability, and vulnerability means possible pain. Or we can choose. Choose to love despite the risk. Choose to build despite the uncertainty. Choose to stay when leaving would be easier. Takeo and Riko chose the second path. It didn't make them perfect. It didn't solve everything. It didn't guarantee a happy ending, but it gave them something far more precious: conscious choice. Ownership of their own lives. The ability to say, this is ours. We built this. And no matter what the world says, it's real. And sometimes that's enough, more than enough. It's everything. Before you go, if this story moved you, leave a like so more people can discover it. Subscribe for more tales of honor, love, and rebellion from ancient Japan. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and give this story a score from 0 to 10. Your support keeps these stories alive.